It is Shirley with Spirit of Matter, and the day is Mercury, the hour is Sol, and we are just transitioning from a Mercury day to a Sol night to a Sun night. Sun in the seventh house, and I'm getting a call to talk about certain things to do with relationships, and actually the Venus retrograde that's in Leo. The moon is applying to conjunct Deneb Algedi, opposing Venus retrograde. So maybe that's why I'm called to talk about this. And Saturn, the ruler of the moon, is retrograding Pisces. Okay, as I was watching, I'm also watching YouTube, not recording only. Was watching Lada and Trifon talking about the Venus invisibility. And apparently Venus became invisible in the 29th of July. I don't know until when. And also Mars is invisible, if I'm not mistaken. So the invisibility of Venus, which is another facet to the retrograde, is basically, except for the Cazimi, where Venus is in the light of the sun, she just receives an update. But it's basically where we are not getting the light of Venus. And so the situation for women is more difficult. I'm not going to repeat word by word what Trifon says. Please watch the video. But he also associates the nearness to Hydra. And more on that on like the original video. So as I was watching, I'm watching, taking breaks, watching, taking breaks. And in the meantime, somebody said something about scandals of people, of women. And I'm like, okay, there were no names. And then I saw that Lizzo basically is persecuted by 3 women for mistreating her employees, basically in sexual exploitation. So she was basically, this is basically what she's accused of. It is sex trafficking, because what she did, she was forcing these women to enact a sexual act with somebody at the strip club or a nude dancer or something like this. So this is not just sexual harassment. You must understand, this is human trafficking. And I have to say, I have been hearing, and I won't say no names. If you're intelligent and you actually listen to the lyrics, you will understand. Some women singers singing about something to do not with them being a stripper, but with them having strippers and girls as employees that are supposed to get their money first, and I'm like, okay, this one thing came up. And then another thought came that they used to have this every once in a while, but that was around basically cheating. So there is this sense across communities, it's both women, but it's not only women, okay? That if a person, let's say you have a couple, one person of the couple is cheating, okay? Who will the partner of the person who is cheating will hate on, okay? Usually the person that they are cheating with. Although in most situations like this, the problem is like Monica Lewinsky, okay? Exploited her, so he placed one front towards her, and she thought, okay, maybe, a person can fall in love or something like this, and it might not be the most okay thing in the world, but then actually from the man front is basically exploitation, okay? And so usually when you have two partners, I'm talking about monogamous couples, okay, naturally, or declare to be monogamous, when you have two people, one of them, man or woman, is cheating, okay? Usually what happens is the person who is cheating, the person who initiated the whole damn scandal, he's not gonna cheat with all these girls that send him pictures, or with all them boys that send her dick pics, right? Because it's the same, it's the same. But is when he initiates or when she initiates something, usually with someone who doesn't have a social political status that is the same as the person who initiated. Okay, sometimes that other, I'm not talking about the two couples that kind of have a secret affair between each other and the same status. That's not what I'm talking about. But usually what happens is basically exploitation that is presented as affair. And so the person who is in a lesser position is perhaps, starved from love, starved from connection. And they think they found something, and then they basically try to, how should I say, like find their path, find their way. Okay, like, okay, this happened, what do we do now? And there can be various levels of that. And so what happens is that this third party that basically has been exploited is being hated on, even by men or women. Mama, please, I'm recording. It's the same. And as I'm bringing this all together, what happened with Lizzo and understanding this is not, exploitation, sexual harassment, all that is not a gender thing in essence, in as much as it is a structure thing. Okay? Luna on the Neb Al-Gidi opposing this Venus retrograde and invisible Venus is kind of bringing into it's kind of like plucking the essence, plucking from the root of the issue. The root of the issue, power discrepancies, sickness in society, and these things are kind of being pulled from the root. And another case I saw, another case of a therapy person that was molesting their patients. And molesting is the right word because their technique is to get the person to regress to the child state and then hurt them when they're in the child states, even if they're coming as adults. And yes, they also do this to children. And so whenever a person like this is being exposed and they're not a clinical psychologist, and even though the majority of these offenders are actually clinical psychologists and psychiatrists, then that case is being recruited. And this also happened in the astrological community to a certain degree. That case is being recruited to say, oh, it's because this therapist was not clinically trained in academia, because there is lack of regulation. Well, in fact, the places where there are the regulations are places that are no less and sometimes even more hurtful, because the entire system is against the person who was hurt if they dare to speak up, and if they try to seek for help, no place. Okay, it's like webs on webs of things. So bringing all this together, okay, with Venus retrograde invisible, we're kind of asked to look at the very essence of the heart, which is exploitation and power abuse. Okay. Yeah, Pluto here is not doing very much. It's just in conjuncting Venus, but Saturn retrograde in Pisces, that's the ruler of this den of Al-Gadin, here with the Sun in the 7th, so relationships at this particular moment when I'm speaking up. We're kind of asked to look at each case through what we call both the veil of ignorance. Again, the veil of ignorance is basically if I told you a scenario, okay, so let's say what happened with Lizzo, or singers that sing about having a sort of brothel and having dancers to dance for them, basically are doing, they're owning places where there is sex work, and we don't know if it's sex work or human trafficking. So women that are in high ranks in human trafficking organizations. And if I told you such a thing and I did not tell you anything about the gender, the color, the education, the whatnot, what would you say about this? So this is the veil of ignorance is good to practice, but we don't need only the veil of ignorance, and we also need awareness of the power structure in society. So for example, if you, and this is also the work of Aries here, because the moon is sextile in Aries in Aries. I don't know if I can show you this. No, I cannot show you this. Aries is in 24 degrees Aries, and Aries is just that one who her case kind of fell. We call it in Hebrew fell between the chairs. Okay, so imagine you went through sexual harassment in academia, but it is by a lecturer in gender studies, and you're a cisgender male student. I did not invent this. Actually happened a couple of years ago in a university in the United States. And I really had to cut. I really had to more cut. And so let's say you're that male student. You don't get, and it's a Me Too era, you don't get the validation of women. Okay, people don't pay attention to you because you're a male student and she's a gender studies lecturer. Okay, this actually happened. Except for me and my Me Too bestie, nobody paid attention to this case. Nobody supported. We couldn't support him directly. It didn't happen in our country. But the thing is that Aries does that thing exactly. She gives you the exact same case, but flips in the identities, the structures, the story, and we are all kind of forced out of our projections, our prejudice, or look at the Amber Heard case. Okay, there was a Me Too case, and I admit it, I'm so happy that the Amber Heard case came a couple of years after Me Too, because I'm a Me Too veteran, and for that, I needed to be validated. Like, if that would be in the same spot, maybe I wouldn't even be here to talk to you. Maybe I would just commit suicide or mass murder or whatnot, because I would feel so isolated. But the thing is that a single case is happening with varying figures. Okay, Venus invisible retrograde is also trying to these Aries. So it's like, okay, you have sexual harassment. Now it is a woman that is body shaming people when she is fighting against body shaming. Okay, and so that was like the Lizzo case. Or now you have a woman who is basically top rank in human trafficking organization, possibly. Okay, how would you know to differentiate if this is a legitimate sex strip club or sex club or whatnot, or if it is human trafficking? How would you know? What if she exploits these employees? What if she mistreats these employees? Now this is human trafficking like this, okay? And so it is a woman that is in charge of these people, okay? Those are the type of things that are coming to be discussed. And when it comes to relationship, it's kind of like, oh, we all support the woman that said, oh, I was hurt by this, I was hurt by that. But what if that man is your spouse? Okay, now it's like, oh, he was cheating with her, you know, before things became violent. Maybe probably he initiated or she initiated. Okay, and so we are being asked to kind of look around and see what is our verdict, what is our opinion, what are our projections, and it is a thought experiment, but here with actual cases. So this is both Aries here into play, Moon on the Neb Al-Gedi, because Moon on the Neb Al-Gedi is red distribution, wealth redistribution, okay? It's a red distribution of the protection that we have, okay? If you think about the Neb Al-Gedi and the notion of for 1.5, 2 years, people just believe everybody who said I was hurt. Okay, we needed that. People needed to be validated. And then, wow, a man could say I was hurt and be believed, which is what happened eventually to Johnny Depp. Okay, so there's also unification around themes of victimhood by being in a situation where everything is corrupt. Okay, and there is I cannot ignore that there is the context of Pluto in Capricorn here. It's not directly doing anything. It is squaring Aries, but it's kind of a culminating effect of we had a black president, we had an orange president, we had a woman, you know, president or prime minister or whatnot. We have blacks on top. We have lady blacks on top. We had fat lady blacks on top. We have queer trans ladies blacks on top. We have everything on top. Okay. Can we just tend to the fact that when something is on top, somebody pays a price for that, and tend to that. So this is about kind of the mixing of the things that we are seeing here. And again, because of the aspects to Venus, we see this one right now with women. Okay, the women. Unfortunately, as Venus went invisible, Lada noted that Sinead O'Connor died just when Venus went invisible. So yes, also women who were victims of corruption, and we all have to understand corruption is not, oh, I was hurt by this guy or by this girl. It's what happens to the person. And this is the journey of Pluto and Capricorn. Okay, let's say you were hurt by this person. So usually you say, okay, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to say, let's say it's women and men. I'm not going to say all men are shits. I was hurt by one person. I should try to date more guys, right? I should try to date guys that are different so I will have a good experience. And they did guys, and it's not something, not good things happen. So I say, okay, maybe I should speak to people. Then I go and I speak to people. Maybe it is a therapist, maybe it is a friend, a social group. And I hear things and I feel like I don't belong there. It's like they're telling me things that are not getting to the bottom of this. And I'm not getting a solution where I can go on with my life. And so I say, okay, I will not date people now. Let's go to work. I go to work, and then something happens with the boss, with the colleague, with the this. I say, oh, fuck it, I cannot anymore. And then you get trauma, you get sick, now you try to treat it. Now something happens with the therapist, okay? And so on. Or you go to the police, and then you try to file a complaint. Something happens. I had when I was in high school, I had a very good Bulgarian friend, and somebody put something in her drink. Fortunately, nothing happened at that place, but she went to the police, and then the policeman tried to hit on her. Okay, she was being a good citizen, trying to report this so it won't happen again, but the policeman tried to hit on her when she's vulnerable. Fortunately, like, it was not something physical happened, but that was the case. That is the level of corruption that we're dealing with. And so you say, oh, maybe I will talk to a woman. Let me talk to a woman. And so this woman is protecting the offenders. Okay? That is the level of corruption that the Aries story is dealing with. And now with invisible Venus and the context of Pluto finishing up in Capricorn, we're basically looking at how all the fabrics of corruption that Capricorn represents, or in the Capricorn land or structure, are being exposed. It's like, oh, those are the many things that can happen in Capricorn land. Those are the many taboos. Those are the many secrets. Or that can happen as harassment. That can happen as bullying. That can happen as financial violence. That can happen as spiritual attack. That can happen as things that present themselves in therapy but are chemical castration to the victim but it's not even castration to the offender, it's castration to the victim. And all these things kind of point at what is being well, humanist is not a good word for it because l'homme is man in French, but what is being a good person? Okay, what is being in favor of the people? Now, when Pluto is about to go to Aquarius. So all of the wounds kind of, and there is also the side effects. A lot of people that were abused or molested, if they become offenders, okay, sometimes not consciously even, or they let loose and they would have a joke, or they would have a this, or they would have, as a Me Too veteran, I often had to kind of really guard my speech because I could have say something that is out of the blue, like weird, and I'm like, is trauma speaking? But for people it can be like this, it can be worse. And like the saying goes, hurt people, okay? And this is true to male offenders, and this is true to women offenders. And what do we do? Okay, what do we do so the entire society is safe to work with? And I guess because Leo is my sixth house, I can't help but bring in also labor-related issue. And I can't ignore how, when you think about what a performer, which is very Leo, or a leader, has to go through, the stress levels, when Beyonce had her last, like, she's still she's still touring, but now in her last tour in the beginning, she was hurt. And so she couldn't dance the way she would dance in previous shows because she had to guard her health. And this is Beyonce, okay? She probably was so, she had the accident, I think, with the knee. She has a lot of stuff with the legs, but it was so intense that she didn't want to give up the performance for the fans, but also, and probably also for her daughter, but also she had to, like, she really had to make sure that she won't have to cancel, so she had to save her energy. And one of the singles that Beyonce came before she went out with the Renaissance album was Break My Soul. Okay, it's basically about not working the 9 to 5, that is frustrating, not being exploited at work. I'm going to stop. And you think about how the irony of Beyonce, basically the hardest working woman in the industry, that has not been, no, because she mistreats herself. It's the Virgo paradox. Like, the Virgos mistreat themselves, and then they expect for the same standards from the people around them, and so it's not that they exploit others, it's just they mistreat themselves, and then everybody suffers. And she, unfortunately, is also known for that. Classic Virgo. So, as ironic as that was, her fans would come to a show, wait for the Break My Soul song, screaming about, like, wiggle, 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 release the job, release the this, and criticize Beyonce that she didn't dance as much. Now, what do you think the internal pressure on a performer is when something like this happens? Okay. Now think, let's say it would not be Lisa. Let's say it would be a man singer, man performer. Okay? When your body is being so much in the front, so visible, all the times, then you start losing it. Then what comes out of you is an offender towards the people that you work with. Okay? This is a structural thing. It's not an agent thing. It's a structural thing. It's just the structure of these industries, whether it's academia, whether it's politics, whether it's jobs or corporate jobs. It's kind of like you build a business model and then you try to imitate something. So in Israel, it's the army. And the army is like the worst organization that you could have, but then they build everything trying to imitate that worst organization that you could have. So it's kind of like, instead of correcting the army and bringing into the army, they are imitating the army and destroying the entire working sector, private and public sector. So, or it's the academia, which is basically copy pasting the church. Okay. And then you would have the private and public sector kind of copy pasting that. We recently had a club that was shut down. It was supposed to have been a stripper club, but it was not a stripper club. It was something that called itself the Taboo Club, and they called themselves the College, literally the College. And they were doing human trafficking and basically enslaving women and, like, all these things in the guise of this is just, a dungeon club or a sex club or whatnot. And so eventually they were shut down. Actually, now with the Venus retrograde, they finally were shut down. So, and I'm not talking about the legitimate stripper club. Like, this is not me coming to take the income from sex workers, right? I'm talking about exploitation and human trafficking under the guise of legitimate sex work. So that is yet another thing that comes into play. If the entire industry is human trafficking, what are our expectations? And if we, the crowd, what is the place of the crowd? Okay, what do we hail? Literally, what do we hail? Do we hail Hitler? Because a person who is one person who's performing, and they have agenda, they have things they want to deliver, they choose their battles. Okay, like, even if you're the best feminist ever, they choose their battles, and eventually they have to bring in a crowd, so they have to apply to the masses. And this is just a juncture between Capricorn and Aquarius, because the king, whether it's a plutocrat or a performer, which is a plutocrat, it's the frontier person, but both the politician and the like anybody you see basically that is doing leadership or culture, affecting the culture, all of these people are frontier person of something that has also hidden people around it. And eventually the frontier and the people behind that, as they are trying to guide the crowds, they are also they choosing their battles. Okay, so let's say you have an agenda or an activist agenda as a person with Capricorn 11th. Okay, let's say you have an agenda, and your agenda is spread willing consent. Okay, now you need to get that to the discourse. Or your agenda is inform people about how prevalent the nature of non-dual, non-volitional, non-dual experiences. Now, who knows what is non-volitional, non-dual experiences? If I wanted to say that, I have to choose my battles. So what would I say? I would say things that apply to you. Okay, depending on your culture, the women that go into trance as they are giving birth. Oh, but women don't go into trance as they are giving birth. They're getting a shot, and now the drugs are missing. I would say, a schizophrenia. Oh, but most people are not actually diagnosed with schizophrenia, even though they go through the same experiences that people who are diagnosed go through. Okay, so I have to find the lowest common denominator that everybody knows. And I have to get the attention of the crowd. Okay? All the while, I'll have to build a corporation. I'll have to build a fund. I'll have to have a trust so that I can control the money. And so it's kind of like, to get there, to change something from within, I have to apply to all these structures. And then I really have to make it concise. Like, what is it that I want? What is the one thing that changes everything? And for the rest of the things, I just economize and choose my battles. Okay? So these people, men or women, they choose their battles. And as a result of that, they are inherently succumbing to being a part of things that, whether they agree with or not, eventually they are the perpetrator of. This is what happens in academia, in army, in politics, in music industry, performing, and so on and so forth. So we really have all these things around. Okay, and people that we didn't think about are being reminded that, hey, weren't you supposed to support body shaming? Now you're body shaming your employees. But this now is still done to the leaders, to the people who are plutocrats. And they are plutocrats, they're just visible plutocrats. So that's the front person. Okay, how many hours does Beyonce work for her crowd? She works like a slave. It doesn't matter how much money she makes, she works like a slave to get there. Okay? And same with Lizzo, same with anybody you see, including Donald Trump. Okay? These are the people that are the frontier people. Behind that, there are also hardworking people, and behind that, there are many things that we don't even know. But then, as these people are working and they're choosing their battles, there is also what we call the lowest common denominator, and this is already what we call the populi, okay, the people. So there are the ways in which you manipulate the people, but there are also the ways in which you are manipulated by the people. There are also the way in which to penetrate the market, you have to have a certain marketing strategy that appeals and applies. It's kind of like the hook, okay? If fishes will go for the worms, whatever hook you put in there. So if I have to fish, I must put the hook and some worm on the hook. Okay, I cannot put a pizza, I cannot put a Doritos, they like worms. I have to apply to them for something, for one to get them, for one to get their attention. Okay, I have to blend. Then I have to think, what do I want? Do I want to eat? Do I want to release them? Then why did I did it? I was just abusing them. They're not gonna learn to not go for the worms. That's their food. Okay, I'm not gonna bring them enlightenment by playing with them. But we have a place where there are some places where we are like the fishes, which is sometimes good to know. You know, it's good to know where it's like, this is a worm, you're gonna go for the worm. There's a hook there, it's a problem. Okay. And not to think that you wouldn't go for the worm. Sometimes to be wise is to understand that you are the fish. And at the same time, there are places where we can interfere. There are places where we can interfere, and for at least, if you're coming to see a show by an artist that first single is release your job, I'm starting to work for me, I'm not going to be exploited in the 9 to 5s, they work me so damn hard, ironically sung by Beyonce, and I'm going to work for me, I'm going to build my own foundation, and you are dissing them for not doing Arbeit macht frei, basically, who is the Nazi now? Okay, who is the Hitler? Okay, there is the part of what are you hailing, and then there is the part that people already come to you with a certain agenda. How do you as the crowd deal with that? I don't know if, for the case of Lisa, I don't know how the crowd is going to come about, okay? But then there would have to be this question, okay, will these women be believed? How will it be treated? How do we deal with the whole issue of sex? How do we even get to a point that somebody has the power to ask from or to demand from their employees to touch somebody who works in a sex club or whatnot that is currently nude, and to perform sexual acts with them without having been discussed, without having been agreed, without, like, how do we even get there? How did we even get here? Okay? Both this sex club, this sex club has people watching, and these people are not only men, and both Lisa's performance have people watching. Okay? That again, we have the whole question of the cancel culture, And how is a person supposed to make a life while making a living? Okay, all of these things kind of tie. I'm seeing this with Leo being my sixth house, so I'm seeing that to do with labor. And so for the Lizzo case, it was not the body shaming that caught my ear so much as the exploitation of labor. Um, and you will see it from whichever placements you will have. So yeah, so this moon on the Navalgadi opposing Venus retrograde but invisible, um, kind of stirring up the pot, but there is an absence of key figures. Okay, Venus invisible is an absence of key figures here. There's an absence of certain understandings, and Luna and the Navalgadi basically comes to create order. Like, whoa. In the Lizzo case, we had a very, very Holocaust-like situation because there was a stripper or strippers that were nude. There were the employees of Lizzo that were basically asked to sexually violate the strippers. Okay, this is the story as it's been told. I can only treat what I see, right? And so why did I say Holocaust looking? Because those are exactly the type of humiliations that were done during the Second World War. And that was basically the employees of Lizzo being perpetrators towards the strippers, okay? But them being also the victim here, okay? We must pay attention to this part too, okay? The offender is the victim, and the offender is the victim, or the offender is being forced to do something that is oppressive towards another person. And then there is the saying, the Tao that you can see is not the Tao. And we need to all learn from this, okay? There are many people that we see that are presented as they are the offenders. We don't know what is going on, who is forcing who, why are they doing what they're doing, are they threatened for their life or something? How do you come out of this in a situation where we can all make a life while making a living? Okay? We know that essentially when people have willing consent, they're going to make the babies that they can make with willing consent. They're going to put so much into their babies simply because, and we're not going to get overpopulated. Not only that, the babies will have more time to play in nature, to play, they're going to want the land, they're going to want, the pizzas, they're going to want the golden retrievers, they're going to want the good life for themselves, for the children. And when they have a good balance of contraction and expansion, a good balance that allows you for a willing consent, then they can find solutions because they can take the time to relax, rethink, reshape, come back. Okay, that when you have people who practice willing consent, know that the more they practice it, their life is, even though life is difficult, does become more fulfilling. And that being said, this is the desired. Okay, now we are in a situation where the employees are being threatened to commit sex offenses to other sex workers that are already going under stigma, because people don't know if you're a sex worker, people don't know if you do it volitionally or not volitionally. So either they patronize you for no reason, or you run into people who say that what you say is that you are committing some sort of a sin for doing whatever it is that you do, and all this like weird stuff that you. And if you are a sex worker and somebody commits offense to you, then nobody believes you, because it's kind of like, oh, but you are a sex worker. This is not your job. Okay, so this is like really getting at the point where the offenders basically sue the person that made them do it, but the offenders were also the victim because they didn't want to do it. Okay, that is a big deal. I think a lot of what we see as sex offense is also in this way. Okay, a lot of what we see, and it's also true to men. Okay, we understand that men in many ways are basically being molested by their own society, and then deprived of the ability to understand anything. I'm not even talking about masculinity, because what is masculinity even? um, but they're basically being deprived of self so much so, and I guess this is what Aries is trying to show us here, so much so that there isn't an agent there. Okay, and as Pluto is approaching the sign of AI and aliens and nervous system and frequencies and things that happen in the air that are not materializing visible, that we can all observe with the naked eye, we're kind of being asked to re-observe the damages that are happening from a perspective that is beyond agency. Okay, in the astrological community, Cameron was really scrutinized when he said, please look beyond victim and perpetrator. And of course, it was understood as victim blaming. And I kind of think that, I know he's doing a lot of grounding work and receiving energies from the earth and so on, so channeling and downloading. And I think that's kind of like what, I don't know if that was what he was trying to say there, because he was obviously not intending to mistreat anybody. It just came out really bad and triggering you, but it was not the intention. Um, but this is kind of like what Aries is asking us to do. It's like, ooh, revise, revise, revise what you think is happening here. Revise this point of view, like revise, like there's something else going on here. Revise. And we kind of ask to make a certain step where what was true to Capricorn is not true to Aquarius, and at the same time there are certain things that are true to Capricorn that are true to Aquarius. If we get to the essence of Capricorn, we get to the top of the mountain, we see it from a bird eye view, we're kind of really asked um, to pay attention to this, to ask ourselves, you know, instead of shutting the lights down and seeing who is the shiny knight in shiny armor, or knightess in shiny armor, or princess, or I don't know, we understand that what we saw as the knight in shiny armor was the knight towards us, but he was molesting towards others. And now we are asked to turn the lights on, turn the light back on, and ask ourselves, when the light comes down, how do we create now a structure or structures that are going to make it easy for us to do the right thing at the right time with the right people? Okay, we're basically being asked to tend to this question. And you know, with Pluto Capricorn, we're kind of like, well, add women to the parliament, add trans women to the parliament, add this, add that. And as our regimes collapse colossally, we're basically, we're basically being called back to we, the people. And it's very difficult to say, you know, let's say you're monogamous with someone. You think they cheated on you. Eventually they basically exploited somebody. And that somebody is trying to get out of there. Okay? And you think that somebody is cursing you, but maybe that somebody is doing return to sender. Okay? And they don't know who sent this. Okay? This is why I talk about non-specific return to sender, deflection, and so on and so forth. Or that somebody is hurting you. Okay, you think, oh my God, this is the power person. This is the person who's exploiting the power. No, this person is being exploited. They're being forced to do so. They're being threatened for their life even to do so. like, okay, what is going on? And you know how the people that we call, let's say, narcissists or borderlines or whatnot, outdated, but I have to catch your attention with something that you heard from the discourse. You know how these people, they can sometimes be very, very empathic, and then it seems like they are split. Okay, sometimes something happened to the person, but sometimes they are part of a certain cult, they are part of certain something, some hidden cult, some hidden this, and they are themselves split. Okay, so it's kind of like the people that we thought are at power are not really as much power that we thought that they are, and we're nobody's punch bag. you know those kind of very ridiculous situations come up. And we also have, the moon is applying basically to square Sedna, slowly, but it is applying to square Sedna. And I'm reiterating again the Sedna story. The Sedna story was that it is an Inuit myth. She was the kind of girl who didn't want to marry. She didn't want anything to do with anything, and her father didn't know what to do with her, and he knew that he will die. Somebody has to take care of her, so he sold her to a man, okay, because he wanted somebody to take care of this child. At least somebody will feed her, somebody will this. And of course, this man mistreated her. She tried to escape. She got to her father and was at the sea, and she tries to come from the water, and then he drowns her. Okay, basically he kills her. And then he was regretting all his life for what he did to his daughter. And he understood that selling her to a man was not the good thing, that he thought he was doing the best thing for his daughter, because his daughter wouldn't marry anyone, and he didn't know what to do, and he knew he would only live this much. And so Sedna becomes the queen of the underworld. Again, and mythically, she's basically teaching us not only respect to the sea, creatures of the sea, okay, to not over harvest and to appreciate and to treat the sea creatures right, but also she teaches us to demand respect and to expect respect, okay. And the father of Sedna, you don't hear about it in all the versions of the story, because they don't touch on the father so much. It's like, oh, he's the great evil person, but the father lived with the grief all his life. He lived with the grief of what happened, what he did to his daughter. Basically, he was trying to save her. Okay, basically, he was trying to save. And this is Inuit myth that is, I don't know how, probably centuries old. And you think about, I don't know too much about Inuit culture. So you think about this Inuit culture and how they had this myth, and I don't know what is the relation to women there or to daughters there, but they had this wisdom that selling your daughter is not the right thing to do for her, crazy as it sounds, for so many, maybe centuries even. And I'm thinking, I'm living in Israel, and we have in the Negev, we have in Bedouin tribes a lot of girls that women say, a lot of girls, so many young girls are buried in the sand, in the desert, because they didn't agree to marry to someone, or they were sold to someone because nobody found a place for them. So it's this sadness story. And of course, I found out when Sedna ingressed to Gemini, that was when I heard about this. So this is also really beyond perpetrator and victim to how do we all make better life on this planet. Okay, more willingly consensual life, more focused on thriving, and to understand that most of our survival fears are around overpopulation. Okay, where there are going to be too many of us, there's not going to be enough food. Okay, and we are also called, I grew up as secular, and I did not grow up in a tribe, and I also fear the tribe culture, like I just told you what happens in the Negev around tribe culture. That being said, the understanding of the seventh generations principle, which is basically a Pluto opposition, and how we need to think 7 generations from now, what will be the best for the land, for the nature, for the culture. I heard this from someone who basically has my family name, and she has roots in Native American Cherokee, and yeah, I remember Cherokees, and she says we need to think 7 generations. Okay, so this is the person I heard from. I know very little, so I cannot give credit to what I don't know, but I understood that it's prevalent. And she says most of the tribes, the various tribes at least, we all have rituals that are quite similar. Okay, and the thing is that when we are living and thinking about our joy as nourishing the land, and the land is nourishing for us, then we can understand, we can look around us, and we can understand more and more and what to do that will stand the test of a Pluto opposition. We are asked for this right now as Pluto is going from Capricorn to Aquarius. We are asked to think about this. What will the seeds that we saw now, although now it's decreasing moon, but the seeds that we saw now, they will hold for 7 generations. How can we think in terms of what's in favor of 7 generations? 7 generations are grandchildren will still be thriving. Okay, their teeth will still be healthy, and the teeth is not for nothing. I recently saw, before Oppenheimer came out, I saw a video that described the Manhattan Project. And that one of the people that accompanied me a lot from the world beyond, whether by thinking about them, reading them, or having some sort of connection I cannot explain. Okay, I'm not like a medium, but maybe I don't know, was Richard Feynman. And when he talked about science, and he was a young boy in Manhattan Project. He was a young boy, freshman, I think, when he was recruited to work in Manhattan Project. And he was like a little kid in a chocolate factory, because like all this crazy mind, all these people, these great thinkers, it's kind of like the great chiefs of the Society of Science that he got to work with. And he basically, after Manhattan Project, he talked about science, and he especially gave the example, couple of times he gave the example of brushing the teeth. And he said, who says brushing the teeth, that everybody doing like this, brushing the teeth is bad? And I did not understand what did he have from brushing the teeth. I was like, what is bad in brushing the teeth? And then I saw a video, only this year, only recently, I saw a video about fluoride. And I know this kind of like fluoride, not good for you. Yes, good for you. Kind of you want the toothpaste to be without fluoride. And I'm just tending to my own teeth now. And eventually I saw that as the industrial age came, there was excess fluoride by the whatever chemistry they were doing there to manufacture machines, and they didn't know what to do with that. And then came the Manhattan Project that said, oh, we need that fluoride, this is very good for us. And then they gave it to the Manhattan Project. But after Manhattan Project was finalized, they didn't know what to do with it again. And so they decided to make this advertisement that fluoride is good for your teeth. Now, the thing is, in tiny dosages, fluoride is actually good for your teeth. But they put it in the water, they put it in toothpaste, they put it in, and now if they put it in the soil, then everything grows with fluoride, okay? And you think about the biblical story of the fathers that ate already unripe fruits. And what is eating unripe fruit? Come on, think erotically. It's lack of will and consent. It's eating something that is not ready. Okay, it's lack of will and consent. And the fathers did that. The fathers ate the fruit that was not ripe, and probably they had to do it for there was not fruit they had to go really quickly or whatnot, and the children got their teeth rotten. Okay, so the fathers did something, and the rotten, the not ripe fruit was basically, I think it was analogy for molestation, because it goes like it's told in the context of a sin, like the fathers committed a certain sin, and then the children's teeth are getting rotten. And in the monotheistic Bible, there are a couple of phases of moral perception. So one is when the fathers eat bad food and the children's teeth are bad. But there are also times in the Bible, and I don't know who else is talking about. I'm sure if I said it, like to Gigi or to Lada, they would tell me, yes, 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 it is this, it is that, but I don't know what is this. But the thing is, there are times in the Bible where, and the Bible, you can look at it as a history book, okay? It's history told from generations to generations. It's not about believing in God, it's just about history of our times. And in the Bible, basically, there are times where whatever the fathers did, it's like in the Bible, it's described as God says, okay? Now, at this time, whatever the fathers did, it doesn't matter. Now, sow good seeds. Now, you, the children, you must do good. It will affect you. It will not affect your children. It will not affect your fathers. It will affect you. And there are times like this. And so I kind of feel that with Pluto in Saturn, it's basically Pluto's composting something and rejuvenating, or kind of like finding the gold in the trash. And Saturn is karma, it's time. So composting time and karma. We get the chance to kind of, remember. And if you go back to the fluoride story, basically the people who made the A bomb, it was not Feynman. Feynman was Pluto in Cancer. But the people who made, like the Oppenheimer and I don't remember, like, well, Einstein for sure, who gave the call, like, Hitler is going to do it, so we must do it first. They were Pluto in Gemini. What do people most complain? Not only that recently people are absolutely talking about, the teeth of the people who lived before us, they were so healthy. We constantly have problems with our teeth, where our teeth are not as good. We don't know if it's nutrition, if it's like, what is it? We are so advanced as society, but our teeth suck. And that's a part of that, not the entire story, of course, was that fluoride. Okay, basically it's everywhere. Unless you're living on, off grid in some place where you do get access to water, do not have that. It's in your food, it's in your everything. You really have to go back to 7 generations, even more than 7 generations back, to rechange the thing, to recharge, to grow your own foods, to grow this, kind of like you're called to do it over again. Very much in Saturn fashion, but a way larger transit. And that's why I suspect it has to do also with the Pluto ruled by Saturn's composting the times. And so the Pluto Sagittarius is opposing. It is around these 7 generations. You have to understand. When people gave birth to 20, it would have been the 7th generation, because Sagittarius is the 7th from Gemini, and it's plus minus 15 to 20 years that Pluto is in a given sign. Okay, so 7 generations, Pluto Gemini, 7 generations, Pluto Sagittarius. And what happens with this Pluto Sagittarius, we call them Gen Zs. What do people complain about the most? Okay, they say you can't work with Gen Zs. You can't control them. They feel entitled. They feel this. And what's the deal with Gen Zs? They want to know that they're making a good living, because in the Pluto Gemini, it was kind of an industrial age. And Gen Z is like, no more this type of 9 to 5. I want to work for me. I'm not going to work for you. What else is prevalent with the Gen Zers? Neurodivergence. Okay, it's a mind that works there. Not only it's neurodivergence, it's not the pathology. Okay, people refuse to have their nervous system, Gemini, Mercury, pathologized, Pluto. Okay, they debunk the notion that if I feel depressed, if I feel this, if I feel that, there's something going with my brain not right. And you say, this is the way my brain works. It's different to yours, and that's okay. I need an environment that works for me. Okay? 7 generations. 7 generations. Like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I think her name was Robin Youngblood said, and probably a lot of other very wise people that lived in tribes or still living in tribes, and their life is still at risk today, like life risk today, every day, which is so fucked up when you think about this. So now we're having another glimpse, okay, with this moon going over Dana-Balgadi, going over Saturn, with Saturn being in Pisces and Pluto in the other Saturn sign, and this Venus invisible, and Venus is also the Venusian, the Earth, okay? Venus is also ruling Taurus, so the Earth, the land, okay? The connection of the people to the land. You're gonna have a lot of spiritual understanding. This is a typical thing for Venus invisible. You get to connect all these things spiritually. You get to connect all these things spiritually, and it kind of like, oh, what these people said, okay, what the elders said. And for me, it was not just the elder, somebody who carries my surname, or that I carry their surname, basically, and it has tribe roots in America, which I didn't even imagine. Okay, I was just searching for my family name in English, that is Youngblood, and I think somebody on Twitter even called me like Cherokee Princess, and I was like, okay, they're probably demoting me. And then I ran into Robin Youngblood, and she was like, she has Cherokee blood. So, oh my gosh, like, was that like they were not demoting me? Like, what's going on? But I grew up in Israel. Okay, I was born and raised in Israel, so you can understand the weirdness. But also, it's kind of like, oh, what these elders said. Oh, these 7 generations thingy. And if I think back to what Feynman said, it's like the secular version of this. It's kind of like, oh, he was trying, he was talking about it, he was trying, he had the tools of science, he had the tools of critical thinking. He tried with what he had to explain to us so that we can understand, but we didn't get this. Okay? And so it's another segment of the time that we are observing the many things, the many cycles, and the many prejudice that we have around those things, okay? And we kind of being asked to sow good seeds to now clear the path, but basically with the next moon cycles, the growing moon cycles, to sow good seeds for centuries, okay? And to begin to think, what would people do 7 generations from now? We do it in science. In science, people constantly think, what would the world look like in 100 years, 150 years, 300 years, 3,000 years? So we're doing that with spiritual stuff, and we do that with science the same way. And this prediction is kind of being called for because we do see how that affects people. And so unifying the concept that we need to be aware to the way people are being marginalized in society, whether they just lived in a certain tribe, but the faith and the belief of tribes that I learned about very vaguely in America was that you balance. It's kind of like the hermetical science, but with nature. You kind of balance the inner. It's like if something is happening in your tribe, basically you try to think, how do we balance ourselves innerly so that that will change? Okay. And so I don't know what were the internal imbalances prior to the invasion of who we call Americans and their destruction of basically the species. Um, species, I said not as demoting, it's like more as, the genocide as human species, if that makes sense. Um, and so we also have to think in society about our own internal balances, all the while not victim blaming ourselves. Okay, it's kind of like, how are we aware of what's going within and how that translates to the outside without running into victim blaming? Okay, so it's about us being dissociated and seeing the chaos around who and what is victim. Okay, like in the case of Lizzo, her employees were molesting other employees, but they were the victim here because they didn't want to do it. They were forced to do these acts. And they are the offenders and they are the victims, and they're suing the person that made them do it, which is say, okay, this is the right thing to do because they are tending to the problem from the root as much as they see the root. Okay, but then you say, okay, this Lizzo is also, there's a problem. So there's something about the land, literally the soil, the land, and to some degree the oceans, the waters, but here is more like the land, and then kind of like, okay, from here, how do we get to willing consent? How do we get to willing consent? And it's kind of like, how do we balance the inner without victim blaming ourselves or victim blaming others? Okay, because that also creates imbalance. In Capricorn, we ask this about our leaders, our bosses, our marital partners, and the hierarchy within marriage or within a relationship, or within sex. And in Aquarius, it's more the tribe. Okay, us as community. Okay, how do we not marginalize people? Not the not, and it's like, you don't want to marginalize the person who committed an offense. You also don't want to marginalize the person who was a victim to this offense. And how do you create a balance between separation that is needed and integration and connection? We are in this, also in my country, which is Taurus sun. Okay, so its sun is ruled by Taurus, and of course in Ukraine, where a lot of people don't know that the Crimean part of Ukraine, the minorities that live there sometimes even preferred Russia because they were mistreated by the locals. Okay, and now the entire Ukraine became the minorities. Now the entire Ukraine became refugees. So of course, on a personal level, nobody is to blame for that. Okay, but it's not about blaming people, and it is about how do we how do we become inclusive without marginalizing? How do we bring into balance? Okay, bring into balance and do it in an effective way without thinking that if something bad happens to us, it's because we're not balanced enough, and those it's not something that I can find a solution to right away. But that is more like the spirit of the times. Okay, and you think about what happened when Saturn went retrograde. Two huge disasters. One was a couple of billionaires delved into the ocean to meet the Titanic and found themselves imploded. But when you think about this, it was the material was made by something that was developed for NASA, and it's kind of like the thought was kind of like, well, if it holds for space, it should hold in the other direction. But if you think about this, above, so below. Okay, if if it will not explode in space where the pressure is way lower, okay, then if you're not this, you don't have things holding it together. You need friction to have a certain balance, kind of like engineering. If and it's like if the variation between the pressures, okay, in space where space is lower pressure and it doesn't explode, then it should be good for the bottom of the ocean too. Okay, it's kind of like it's the other way around, but it kind of like that should be doing the job, because what in essence we are dealing with is, well, isn't so as above so below? If it works for the above, shouldn't it work for the below? We're dealing with variation in air pressure, and why does it act differently, right? Hey, we need to ask this question scientifically, okay? But then we kind of like, oh, these are billionaires, you're bad people, thanks God they went, that was hubris, that was blah, 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 blah. Okay? And of course, the fact that so many people came to look for them and to assist them, and it was too late. All the while, we had a refugee ship with refugees being locked. As the ship was drowning, they were being locked so that they couldn't come out. And they were being tricked, if I'm not mistaken. They were being tricked or fooled, and so they paid their money. They were put on this ship. Ship was drowning, and they were locked so that they couldn't come out. And so many people, nobody came looking for them. Nobody was helping them. We probably would not have heard it if not for how, like it's very difficult to go off the radar, you know? Very difficult to go off the radar because everything is already so connected, interconnected. It's already Aquarius. Okay, Saturn is in Pisces. This happened in the ocean, but this is already Aquarius. This is already. We will probably not hear reports about that, refugee ship. And as much as NASA is concerned, we will not hear about the billionaires either. Okay. Unless everything was so interconnected, you can easily hack into, so you don't even have to hack into a system to be, a personal user and find a plane in the air or a ship at sea. And so this is already Aquarius. Okay, Saturn's like, oh, there's implications. Now you have to report about this refugee ship. It's out there. Or even things that you don't report about, like what happened in Ohio. I think it was gas disaster that happened in Ohio a while ago in the United States. It found its way to the people. Like it wasn't on the news, but it found its way to the people, which was social media, Twitter, and so on and so forth. So the ruler of this Pluto and this Aquarius is now in Pisces, retrograde. And Pisces is about liquidity, and Saturn is about both hierarchy and the hierarchy of the tribe. The tribe is like a study case. It's not the government, but it has, the tribe, it has a chief. It has it's like a tiny kingdom. Okay. If Leo is the kingdom of the empire, a tribe is like a tiny kingdom. It's like a private study case, the micro and micro. Macro and micro, okay? So there are very interesting things happening scientifically and perhaps even sociologically, okay? And I don't have an answer for them. Not only that, Aquarius is my 12th house, so it's the hidden part for me. It's that which I don't know that I don't know. And all of these dynamics, we're really asked to re-observe the dynamics of top and bottom, hierarchy, bosses, what is it that we teach the people, okay? Lack of governance from IR, okay? Lack of governance is not, here we call it andarlemusia, okay? It's not, the word chaos is not fitting because it's scientifically already incorrect to say it, but lack of governance does not mean complete, I want to, there's no way without saying complete chaos, but chaos is, and this is what I'm trying to say. What is chaos? Okay. Chaos is a non-linear dynamic system that have weird attractors and have patterns that are somewhat, they have a trajectory, but they're not predictable 100%. Okay, that is chaos. Systems like the weather, you can interfere in a chaotic system. You can interfere in the weather, you can interfere in the heart, you can interfere in the nervous system. Unfortunately, we already see that being done. For some people, they would say fortunately, but we understand that has all these pros and cons around this, and Pluto is going to show us the cons as well. Yeah, so we're being asked to observe, and we're being asked to, with Saturn in part, we're being asked to kind of like put our feet in the soil, because Saturn rules soil, okay, rules Capricorn, and also put our feet on air. So we're asked to go on air, we're asked to travel, to put our feet on air, or we're asked to put our feet in the soil, but our feet are not going to be so safe in the water. Okay, so dipping our feet into the water, it's not that it cannot be practiced and cannot be even healing, but the thing is that dipping our feet into the water now, or to the deep water now, is not favored. Although there is, you know, we do delve into the depth of the water because Saturn is also doing that. So Jupiter now is in Taurus, so we ask to have our feet on the land, and yet what we carry from centuries ago, from eras ago, pops up from the bottom of the ocean, pops up on the shore. Yeah, and we're asked to take a look at it and to revise, because eventually, if you, and I want to point at Aries here, because Aries is a planet that is a tiny bit bigger than Pluto's. Beyond Pluto, it's a planet. It takes, I think, 500 years and something to surround the Earth. Pluto takes 248 to surround. Did I say to surround the Earth? My God, to surround what we call the zodiac cycle. Okay, from our point of view, if we see, let's say now Aries in 24 Aries, it's going to take 500 years until we're going to see it again from our point of view. It's important to understand. So Aries is a tiny bit bigger than Pluto. She's been observed, tiny bit bigger than Pluto. I think she was observed in 2003. And as she was observed, what they did is say, no, Aries is not a planet, but she's a bit bigger than Pluto. Okay, Pluto is not a planet either. And there was no scientific rationale to do so. Okay, she was just a farther away planet. It is a bit bigger than Pluto. So like we don't want to destroy all the things, that everything that we've built up until now. We don't want to destroy just because we found some evidence. Okay, but Aries is actually calling us to refute our previous paradigms and reobserve something, and be willing to change the paradigm. If you're willing to change the paradigm, it's going to be a bit difficult for you because she catches up us in a certain way. As a native moon square Aries person, It kind of like you discover something, but it takes you a while to believe your own paradigm. Okay, it takes you a while to change. And for humanity, she really does ask us to observe, and she's going to bring a certain chaos that's going to help us to look at things in a different way so that we can reintegrate the energies of Aries. It's like, yes, she's a planet, she's a big bigger than Pluto. Wow, a whole lot of mystery to discover around it, isn't that? But instead we said, no, then maybe Pluto is not a planet, or Pluto is a planet. Or then Aries is a planet too, okay? And when it comes in this context, do you think about the marginalized people in society? Okay, how do we treat that? Do we demote ourselves, or do we say, no, we are divinely guided, so are they? How do we find a way to live together? And Aries and Pluto, they live together, they have no problem. They live together. Sometimes they square, sometimes they trine, sometimes they sextile, but they live together. We are being called to do the same. Okay? So, and yeah, that is the episode for today that kind of began with the personal and ended up with the era, with the spirit of the times, or the mundane around people, and ended up with the spirit of the times. Venus hour already. It's interesting that as the hour turned to Venus, I probably began to speak about the outer planet cycle more here. Or perhaps it's the invisible Venus she's calling to the spiritual, which is just bigger cycles of time. How funny that the moon is right on Dana Balgedian, as I define time with, as I define spiritual as bigger cycles of time. Mind you, I have Aquarius in the 12th house. Of course, I'll be doing that. I'm biased towards doing it this way. But that is also to remind myself of something what Christopher Warnock says about talismans. He said a lot of astrologers, they try to find, because they came as secular and they came into astrology as secular, they try to find, like, maybe through gravity, maybe through this, maybe through that, and explain astrology this way. And they're like, and he's like, no, there are spirits there. It's not the frequencies. All of this is very nice, but there are spirits there that are also existing in the right of themselves. And I'm like, wow, I'm so called out, because I'm so, at first I was resistant to that, but I was like, oh, I have exactly this bias with this Aquarius 12th house, the hidden exploit. When I look into the mystery, I immediately try to come up with scientific theories, with patterns, with this, with that, and explain it by that which I can observe. But it's like, hey, there's a whole other mystery there that you absolutely cannot explain. And I have to accept that. I have to, understand that I'm biased towards being scientific even when I do astrology. So yeah. So at this point, Moon and Balgadi squaring Aries in Aries, sorry, sextiling Aries in Aries. Yeah, we're being asked to consider that we all have prejudice, and under the veil of ignorance, we want to live a good life, all of us. Okay, how do we create that? How do we allow for that? How do we expand on that? So yeah, thank you.